Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 1 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 16, Plans and Conspiracies. Report. Bolivar Trask looked at the screen and the man on it, the man who had contacted him and alerted him to the newest threat facing humanity. Mutants. We have managed to copy many of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s records on known mutants and enhanced humans. Bolivar said calmly. S.H.I.E.L.D. are attempting to get as much information as possible on each new powered individual as they become known. Due to his links with known mutant Wolverine, Superman is tentatively designated as mutant pending confirmation. Similarly, the one known as Cyclops is also tentatively designated as a mutant for the same reasons. But S.H.I.E.L.D. hasn't confirmed it yet. No, Mr. Creed, they haven't. Bolivar said. And the other project? Bolivar smirked. The project was his personal contribution to cleansing the Earth of the scourge known as mutants, the filthy scum whose DNA was twisted, giving them powers denied to true humans. The bastards whose twisted abilities were a warped mockery of the powers of the enhanced humans. The Sentinel project is currently entering final designs and technology testing. Bolivar replied. The debris shield recovered from that fiasco at the World Expo, the so-called hammer drones, have come in very useful. We've been able to adjust quite a bit of the technology used, and the arc reactor we managed to salvage and repair means that we can duplicate it and use it to power the new Sentinels, giving us greater power potential. With a bit of fine-tuning, the Sentinels will be 3 times more powerful than originally planned, and will be able to deploy for 10 times longer between refuelings. Maybe longer, if we continue to tweak the design a bit. I have several operatives working on that now. Excellent. Graydon Creed gloated. And the mutation scanning systems. We had an unexpected breakthrough. Bolivar shrugged. We were seeking a way of using the X gene itself to identify mutants, but that would have required at the very least, skin samples or blood extraction. Not very good from a public relations viewpoint. Then, while we were dissecting one of the test subjects, we discovered something very interesting. Go on. Creed prompted after Bolivar paused. Bioenergy. Creed tilted his head slightly, one eyebrow cocked inquisitively. The bioenergy produced by mutants is measurably different from that of normal humans. It has a different pattern. In fact, we believe that we can probably get the scanners sensitive enough to find the mutation fluctuation in those who have yet to activate their X gene, although if we do that, we may not be able to engineer the scanners down into the volume set aside in the design for them, and they will undoubtedly be too delicate for use in a combat zone. Creed stared at Bolivar, a slow, evil grin spreading across his face. You are saying that not only can you detect active mutants, you can detect their demmed spawn before they develop the ability to wreak havoc. We believe so, sir. Bolivar said slowly, and Creed began to laugh. That is excellent, Bolivar. Absolutely excellent. I expected great things from you, but you have already more than exceeded my wildest dreams. Sir. Oh, develop the spawn scanner by all means, Bolivar. After all, the best way to destroy an infestation is to strike at its source. But it won't be needed for a frontline sentinel, the normal scanner will be more than sufficient for that. The spawn scanner can be deployed at schools and hospitals where it can check as many people as possible, weeding out the muty scum from the true humans. Bolivar nodded. An excellent point, sir. My apologies for not considering it myself. Oh, not at all. Creed said magnanimously. What you have achieved is so far beyond what I had hoped for that you have nothing at all to apologize for. I know that I wouldn't be able to even know where to start working towards what you have created. Please, develop both, the X-gene scanner for the Sentinels and the spawn scanner for use in buildings and possibly mobile mountings like lorries, trailers, or even cars, depending on how fragile they are. We may be able to get the active gene scanner downsized to a point where we can fit them into a mounting similar to night vision goggles, although the detection range will undoubtedly be limited. 10 meters is our current estimate. Bolivar. Creed breathed, his grin widening. Once again, you go beyond what I had expected. Words cannot describe how proud I am of you, how impressed I am with your work and dedication to the cause. Continue with the scanner projects. Should you need to prioritize, the Sentinel comes first, the goggles second, but I am certain that you will continue your miraculous streak. Xavier. Charles looked up with a raised brow at the eye-patch-wearing black man who was standing just inside his door. Nick Fury, how may I help you? Fury strode across the room and sat down on front of the desk, his eye fixed on Charles. I came in person. My superiors do not know I am here, and they will not learn about this meeting or anything that happens in it. I have a warning for you, and a query at the same time. What have you heard about the Friends of Humanity? Xavier paused, his brow wrinkled in thought as he searched his memory. I do not believe they have ever come to my attention before. They will. Fury stated. Despite their name, they're a mutant hate group. That is worrying. Charles admitted. I thought that the existence of mutants was still a secret. I do not believe that humanity is ready for that knowledge yet. Society is still adjusting to the rise of the superheroes. Fury admitted. What your people did, what your ally Superman did, reviving and returning Captain America, has built up a considerable amount of goodwill. Superman doing all those rescues around the globe helps as well. Is he one of your students? I can assure you that Superman is not one of my students, nor does he study at the Institute. Charles replied absolutely truthfully. I must, however, say that I am aware of his civilian identity, although I promised to keep it a secret, and I approve of the things that he does. Reed Richards asked if he was interested in a position. Fury grinned. Your ally Kall has been given an open-ended invitation to join the Fantastic Four, turning them into the Fantastic Five. I'd like for him to join the Avengers if possible. Having another flight-capable operative on the team would do wonders for tactical flexibility. I shall relay both offers to him, but I believe that he is happy with his current position. Charles said calmly. He has expressed an interest in helping to train a group that I have had my eye on. I believe that you already know two of the members. Wolverine and Cyclops. Fury nodded. Logan enjoys his weekly spars against Superman. Charles smiled. He has yet to win, but he's lasting longer. Fury's face lost all expression for a moment, and Charles could feel his thoughts lock up. After a minute and a half had passed, Fury managed to speak. Logan loses to Superman? How? Kid's talented. Logan responded from the doorway. Humble about it, too. He holds back to give me a chance. Not too much, though. Charles had to call upon all his years of self-control to not burst out laughing at the expression on Fury's face. Complete, total, and utter shock. Once again, he could feel Fury's thoughts almost halt as he tried to understand the new information. Logan, Fury said slowly, based on that training exercise you participated in recently, how would you rate Superman against the Avengers? Individually or against the entire current team? Logan asked, strolling over and dropping into the spare chair. Humor me. Both. Logan frowned in thought. Kid can fly and is tough as hell. Fast too. He could take down Iron Man, just a matter of closing in. Thor, probably a close match in strength. Thor's lightning could be a problem, but the kid has one hell of a right hook. My money would be on the kid. Hulk, could go either way, but the kid can fly. He'd probably just fly Hulk into space, let him pass out and then fly him back down. Black Widow and Hawkeye would both go down easy, neither of them could even slow him. I've tried using their stuff against him, he didn't even twitch. Captain America. I'd say a draw without throwing a single punch. They'd talk rather than fight. But if it was training, again, the kid is good. I've helped him, given him a few pointers. As for if he had to go against the whole team, that would be hard. I'd say that he'd probably go down, but he'd take half the team with him, maybe more. Depends on the Avengers' teamwork. And if he, Psyche and me go up against the Avengers. Heh, you'd need a new team. I see. Fury nodded. So the Friends of Humanity would be no threat to him. The who? Logan asked. The Friends of Humanity. They're a group who know about mutants, and don't like them. Think KKK but targeting mutants instead. Logan nodded. I don't know how they found out, but they differentiate between mutants and enhanced humans. Apparently they hate aliens too, I've had to warn Thor twice not to sink to their level. Knew he smelled different. Logan muttered. So, who leads these unfriendlies? We don't know. Fury admitted. We're currently doing an internal audit. We think that S.H.I.E.L.D. may have been penetrated. There's a copy of Superman's record floating around somewhere unaccounted for. We think that your record may have been accessed, and that of Cyclops as well. How the hell does Psyche have a record? Logan snapped. He's only come out of the shadows once. He's a powered individual, one linked to both you and Superman. Fury responded calmly. That makes him a person of interest, and thus someone that S.H.I.E.L.D. keeps a file on. Not that we have much in it, though. Logan snorted and rose. If we find anything, I know how to contact you. Thank you. Fury said. Pass on the offers to Superman, next time you see him, won't you? Sure thing. Logan said, already walking out of the study. Report. I believe that Cyclops is Scott Summers. Mystique said, glancing out of the door to where the 4 members of the Brotherhood were watching a replay of the space mission on the television while a panel of talking heads debated what powers may or may not have been shown by the rescuers. Summers always wears red shades at school, and Toad has seen him firing blasts from his eyes. From his description, I would guess that he is unable to control them, hence the shades and the visor. There was a long pause before Magneto spoke again. So, my old friend is creating his own team at last. Logan alone can be dealt with, but to include an enhanced human like this Superman, do you think that the Brotherhood can deal with them? No. Mystique said instantly. Going head-to-head against them, my team have potential, but even with the best training, it will take years to get their teamwork up to a point where I would be confident about their ability to stop Xavier's students. Especially Superman. Magneto said silkily, and Mystique shivered, grateful that Magneto could not actually see her. Especially Superman. Mystique agreed. He's already proven he's faster than Pietro and stronger than Fred. He's adopted Rogue as his younger sister. We can count on him training her at the very least. And the other students? Magneto said slowly. Kitty Pryde, Kurt Wagner, Jean Grey. And Evan Daniels, their newest member. Mystique added. I will try to find out what their powers are. Evan Daniels. Magneto queried. Perhaps you should ask my son about him. I think he mentioned him before. I will check my files and have any information I might possess on him sent to you. As for Jean Grey, she's a telepath and a telekinetic. Make certain you keep your mental shields up at all times around her. Given how close Xavier is, I do that anyway. Mystique said. Excellent. Chapter 17, Dimension. What do you mean, there's something odd at Bayville? Clark shrugged as Scott looked curiously at the complex readouts, trying to derive meaning from them. I mean just that. I was doing a standard scan when something unusual caught my eye. I thought it was nothing, but a second, focused scan indicated that a certain area of Bayville, primarily around Bayville School, has what I can only describe as a parallel dimensional overlay. I didn't know that humanity even had dimensional technology. Even Krypton used it sparingly for everything but power cores and long-term high-value storage. The amount of energy it needs is too great for anything else. Scott looked at the holographic display. So, what are you going to do about it? Investigate it, of course. Clark said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. If there's another Kryptonian on Earth, I want to know about it. Scott stared at the readout again, then sighed. So when are you going to check it out? Saturday. The dimensional whatever seems stable, it'll last a couple more days. I can use that time to get more readings and prepare the equipment that I need. I'll have to tell Mystique about it. I'll need Principal Darkholm's permission to investigate. Need? Xavier said curiously, and Clark grinned. Well, it'll make it less complicated since we wouldn't have to sneak round. And having official cover means that any cover-up that may be required would be easier to do. I'm sure that Mystique will be happy to see you again. Xavier said with a smile. Clark froze, then turned to look at him, before returning to his console with a head shake. Mr. Kent. Principal Darkholm. Clark returned as he entered the office, closing the door behind him. Mystique gave him a long look, then sighed and dropped her disguise. Another student to be enrolled. Amazingly enough, no. Clark said, sitting down and leaning back as non-threateningly as possible. I was doing some scans of the area, and I discovered something odd. Were you aware that there's a dimensional field overlaying this area? Mystique froze, her eyes wide. It caught my attention, Clark continued, so I thought I'd investigate it tomorrow, when there's no one around. Naturally, having the permission of Principal Darkholm to, say, investigate a possible problem with the electronics, would cut down on the amount of sneaking that I'd need to do. Heck, you can tag along if you want, since you obviously didn't know about the field and I feel certain that you wish to protect your group from any danger, same as I wish to protect mine. Mr. Kent. Clark, please. Clark smiled. Clark. Mystique said slowly, then she shook her head. I'm sorry, but I can't call you that. You're just too. Clark looked at her, then he tilted his head slightly. You really are hard to read. He admitted. I rely on things like heart rates and changing thermal auras to read people's emotions, but you don't have those tells. I'd hate to play poker against you. Mystique stared at him, then against her best efforts, a slight smile crept onto her face. Thank you for telling me that. Clark. Tomorrow at 10. I'll meet you out front. Works for me. Clark said. I'll be bringing 2 helpers. Kurt will be one. Mystique froze. What? Kurt? Why? He can teleport. Clark shrugged. If something goes wrong, he can teleport himself and up to 2 other people out of danger. I see. Mystique said. Does he? I haven't told him. Clark said gently. That is your secret, your decision. Although I think you should tell him, I will not put any pressure on you. I will remain quiet about it for as long as you choose to. For a long moment silence filled the room, then Mystique let out a jagged breath. Thank you. She whispered. Who will be the second? My sister. Mystique jolted in her seat. Anna? Why? Ever since my mother adopted her, Rogue has been learning as much as possible about the technology one use. Clark said. She has made progress learning to read the runes. She can even speak some of the language. I need her to help run the equipment. Why do you ask? You are certain? Xavier said slowly. Mystique is Rogue's mother as well. Adoptive mother. Clark said. After she lost Kurt, Mystique temporarily left Magneto's service. She found Rogue, who had been recently orphaned in an accident, and adopted her. They lived together for almost a dozen years before a mutant who was living nearby was attacked by a mob and Mystique was caught in the middle. Although she survived, she took an injury that would have killed a normal human and Rogue was taken into care. Before Mystique could go after her, Magneto found her and forced her back into his organization. When Rogue's power activated, Mystique wanted to approach Rogue as her mother, but Magneto insisted on using a plan that would make Rogue hate us, so. Charles nodded slowly as he thought about what he had just been told. I promised Mystique that I wouldn't tell either Kurt or Rogue. Clark said quietly. It is her secret to divulge, not mine. Can you trust her? Rogue and Kurt. Clark responded cryptically and Xavier nodded slowly. I agree. Clark parked the van and climbed out. Walking round to the back of the vehicle, he grabbed the first equipment case and removed it. Let me help. Rogue said, coming up beside him, and Clark hid a smile as she grabbed the second case. And completely failed to budge it even a centimeter. After another few seconds of futile struggle, she released the handle and gave him a speaking look as he effortlessly lifted the container. There are Thomas. She began, then shook her head. Never mind. Mr. Kent. Miss Kent. Mr. Wagner. Good morning. Clark turned towards the approaching woman. Good morning, Principal Darkholm. We are not in school hours at the moment. Mystique said with a slight smile, her eyes flicking between the 2 younger visitors. My birth name is Raven. Raven Darkholm. Why is she here? Kurt hissed. I am here because, Although we may be on opposite sides, both Clark and I are concerned about the dimensional field at this school," Mystique said. Kurt flinched as he realized that she had indeed overheard his whisper. "I have not informed the Brotherhood about what we are doing today," Mystique continued. "In fact, I gave them some money and sent them to the mall with instructions to get new wardrobes for themselves. I am here to provide official cover for you all." Clark nodded as Kurt and Rogue looked at him questioningly. "Neither of us knows what this field may do, or what it may contain. It is a risk to both sides, so we've called a truce until it is dealt with." "Indeed," Mystique said. "Clark was kind enough to tell me where the field was centered. I have unlocked the area in question and glanced through its history. It was last used almost 3 decades ago as a set of science labs, but the labs were closed down after an unfortunate incident in which a student and quite a bit of equipment vanished." "A student vanished?" "His name was Jonathan Silvercloud," Mystique said. "I've read through his reports. He was a bright lad, with what amounted to almost supernatural genius with electronic devices." Clark nodded as Rogue closed and locked the van. "Well, Raven, lead the way." Mystique nodded. "All right. The lab is in the basement round the side." Kurt watched as Clark and Rogue started to set up the equipment, occasionally tossing odd bits of techno-babble at each other as they did so. Beside him, sat on a chair that Clark had placed in the corner for her at her request, Mystique, who had reverted back to her blue-skinned red-haired form, leaned forward slightly. "Kurt." "J.A." Mystique glanced over at the other two, then turned back to Kurt. "If you don't want to answer, I'll understand. I just have to ask, are you happy at Xavier's?" Kurt looked at her. "J.A. Fraulein Martha makes cookies und main girl from Amanda, she is und Engel. She is not wreaked by main appearance." Mystique leaned back in her chair and smiled. "That's good to hear. You are one of the more physically distinctive mutants. It's good to know that there's somewhere that you can find happiness. I'm afraid that the Brotherhood wouldn't have been able to help you as much as Xavier did." Kurt looked at her again, his expression perfectly stating his confusion. Then a noise caused both of them to turn towards the center of the room where the main console was projecting a series of complex holograms surrounded by floating runic labels. "What does that mean?" Mystique whispered and Kurt shrugged. "We're doing a basic scan, getting some idea of what type of dimensional field we're dealing with," Clark said. "I've been teaching Rogue how to use this sort of technology," she caught on really quickly. "Stop it, Yaman Meblush." Rogue grinned and Clark laughed. "Okay, primary scans, interesting. We're looking at an active stasis dimension that's stable. No idea how that happened, it's possible in theory, but I've never heard of it being done before." "What's this?" Kurt asked, tapping an odd hemispherical device perched atop a nearby desk. The device suddenly emitted a hum and fired a beam of light which hit another desk. "And caused it to vanish? Mein Gott!" Kurt yelled, leaping back as everyone else stared at the device. "What had happened?" "Well done, Kurt," Clark said, looking at the readouts. "The mass in the dimensional field just increased slightly. That device must be what caused it." "Rogue. I got THA readings," Rogue confirmed, tapping at the console in front of her. "Send in them now." Clark looked at them, then nodded and picked up a crystalline spheroid. Mystique's eyes widened as the sphere remained in midair after Clark released it. "Okay, let's send the probe in and see if we can get a signal. Kurt, can you remember which button you pushed?" "Okay. This is unexpected." Mystique looked up from the clipboard she was holding. Deciding that an inexplicable phenomenon was undoubtedly far more important than, once again, perusing the reports on detentions handed out to students during the course of the week, she rose from her chair and strolled over to the trio standing by the console. "What is it?" Mystique's question stumbled to a halt as she looked into the projected screen and saw a grinning face looking out at her. A face that she recognized from the files. A face that hadn't aged. Jonathan Silvercloud. "Yep, but my friends call me Forge." The teen in the screen grinned. "Another blueskin, huh? You two related?" Kurt opened his mouth, then froze while Rogue stared measuringly at them and Clark face-palmed. "There is a resemblance." Kurt said after a moment, but I am from Deutschland, so. Do what now? Germany. Near the Austrian border. Mystique said, realizing just too late what she had let slip. How did you know that? Kurt asked, and Clark quickly came to her rescue. I wondered about the resemblance myself, so I checked with Mystique. That can wait, though. Forge, was it? Yep. Good to talk to someone at last. Man, this place can be boring, although it's fun watching the other students. Wow, when the girls do their routines in the gym. Forge. Yes sir. Focus. Clark commanded, and Rogue turned away, trying to hide her giggles. Now, from the readouts of the probe, you are in a dimensional copy of this room, yes? Does the machine we found simply transition items into your dimensional space, or can it create a planar interface? A what? Mystique whispered. A portal. Clark hissed back. Geek speak. I'm fluent in it. Oh, it does both. Forge said. However, I kind of screwed up, and the planar interface has a significant pseudo-gravitic gradient. Even if the projector was activated, I can't get out. Need to pick up a lot of momentum, and I can't. I know, I tried the last time some dude managed to activate the device. Clark nodded slowly. Assume acceleration capabilities of up to 10 gravities, top speed of Mach 0.9 and propulsion device mass of 250 kilos. Would that allow for egress? Heck, yeah. Forge crowed. It would work with power to spare. 250 kilos. Mystique asked curiously. Clark grinned, and Mystique's eyes widened in shock. You? What the heck are you made from? Steel. I use my flight skills to reduce my apparent weight. Clark shrugged. My body is naturally denser than normal. So's his skull. Rogue giggled, her giggles turning into outright laughter as Clark gave her a betrayed puppy eye look. Anyway. Clark said. The plan is simple. Kurt, you open the portal, I fly in and pull Forge out. Sound good, Forge? Sure. Forge grinned. Just select portal and press both triggers. Keep them pressed until we get out. Wow, sure, looking forwards to getting out of here. Vayati. Kurt said, and Clark nodded. Kurt pressed the triggers, and a silver-blue disc formed. Back in a minute. Clark grinned, and he strode through the portal. Just as he vanished, the door slammed open, and Rogue was sent flying through the portal before the device seemed to disintegrate in Kurt's hands, pieces flying all over the room. Kurt reflexively vanished in a cloud of smoke an instant before the wall behind him seemed to shatter. Ha! Pietro gloated, balancing the sledgehammer he had just used on his shoulders. So much for Super Geek. Pops is going to be so pleased with me. Mystique stared, feeling her insides congeal. Quicksilver. She whispered hoarsely. What have you done? Chapter 18, Betrayal. Quicksilver. Mystique whispered hoarsely. What have you done? Pietro dropped the sledgehammer onto the floor as the door swung open again, this time revealing the rest of the Brotherhood. I did exactly what Pops told me to. He said harshly. Dad's been getting suspicious of you, Mystique. You've been too fixated on Super Dork, you've been holding us back. Well, guess what, Dad's bringing over some real reinforcements, he's coming with his acolytes and you are going to explain yourself to him. Mystique stared at him and Pietro motioned to Fred. Blob, grab her, don't let her escape. Toad, hotwire the van and bring it round. Dad's gonna be all interested in this tech. You won't get away with this. Mystique snarled and Pietro laughed. You think you're so damned important, huh? Let me tell you a secret, Mystique, Dad never really trusted you, not after you fled from his ally with that brat of yours all those years ago. Lance, get out back and help Toad park the van, I'll gather the goodies. Mystique snarled as Pietro seemed to blur around the room, gathering the sensors that Clark and Rogue had painstakingly positioned, then Pietro vanished and reappeared with something familiar, something she had seen once before when Magneto had forced her to leave her daughter. Mystique's breath caught in her throat. Can't have you escaping. Pietro grinned as he unfolded the package into a coffin-shaped container. Blob, put her in and close the top. Mystique tried to struggle, but Fred was able to force her into the box. As it slammed shut, she heard Pietro speak again. Now, get these things up the van and tell Toad to take them to the meeting place, then return for this blue-boxed bitch. Kurt appeared in Xavier's study in a cloud of smoke, causing Charles to start in shock. Kurt, what happened? Rogue, Superman. Trouble, Zachul. Xavier frowned slightly. Kurt, let me look into your mind to see what happened, dear God. J.A. Kurt gasped. Vhat do he do. Asterisk all students and staff, Clark and Rogue are in grave danger. All members of the Institute get into your training uniforms and get to the front hall as fast as you can. Transport will be provided. Asterisk Charles broadcast. Kurt, are you up to teleporting people to the school? J.A., I am. Kurt gasped. Professor. Martha gasped from the doorway, clutching her side. Is there anything I can do? Mystique lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds around her. The box had obviously been created by Magneto. The metal pieces fit together too well for it to have been hand or machine made, while the small air ducts that prevented her from suffocating were reinforced and lined with sharp blades, as an exploratory finger had proven. The darkness gave her time to reflect. Time to think and time to mourn. Her daughter was gone, lost for the second time, and she didn't know if her son had survived. He had vanished just as Pietro had used his speed to try and strike him down with the sledgehammer that he had used to destroy the machine that had created the portal that Superman had willingly entered to save a long-lost student, and which Rogue had been thrown through. Tears trickled down Mystique's cheeks as she cried for the first time in years. The sound of an engine starting and fading told her that the Brotherhood had loaded the van and were departing with the equipment they had stolen. Then the box suddenly shifted and rose. What are you doing, Pietro? Mystique shouted. Easy. Pietro sneered, his voice slightly distorted by the box but still easily understandable. Pops is coming with his acolytes, remember? He wants you to be there so that he can question you. Blob, let's go. Mystique felt a chill down her spine, then suddenly a loud blast echoed and she was thrown around inside the box as it bounced and tumbled. Several more blasts sounded, along with shouts and snapped commands that Mystique was too dazed to make out. Then the box rang as someone tapped on it. Anyone in there? Yes. Mystique shouted, relief and panic combining in an overwhelming feeling. Get me out. Lie flat. The somehow familiar voice commanded. Then Mystique almost sobbed in relief as the tips of a trio of silvery claws punctured the lid of the box and carved their way round. An errant thought crossed Mystique's mind, comparing her situation to a can of Spam. The claws finished and the sliced metal rose into the air before floating to the side. Mystique sat up and found herself the focus of several sets of eyes. Looking round, she saw Fred Dukes out cold in the corner of the room. What happened to that speedy little bastard? She hissed and Scott tilted his head. Pietro? He got away. Ran like he'd turned yellow. Mystique slumped. Magneto's on his way. I don't know how long he'll take, but it'll be at least an hour if he's coming from his base. According to Pietro, Magneto's bringing his acolytes. Acolytes? Jean asked in a worried voice. Powerful mutants. Mystique said softly. Pyro, Colossus, Sabretooth, Mastermind, and Gambit. He may have more, those are the ones I know about. Scott nodded as the others moved round, searching. What happened to Superman and Rogue? Superman went through a portal to rescue a student trapped in another dimension. Mystique said, trying to hold her emotions in check. Silver attacked and punched Rogue through the portal before destroying the projector and stealing the equipment. Shit. Wolverine cursed. Magneto's getting Kryptonian tech? That ain't good. A pop heralded the arrival of Kurt, along with Xavier and Martha. Mystique froze, staring at the woman who had adopted Rogue without a second thought. Mystique. Charles said soberly. Can you tell us what happened? I already have most of it from Kurt. Charles's question faded as Mystique, overwhelmed by both guilt and relief, grabbed onto Kurt and hugged him tightly, tears trickling down her cheeks. After a moment, the deep silence penetrated and she looked round to see everyone staring at her. Maybe we should take this back to the Institute, Xavier suggested. Kurt, can you transport Martha, Mystique, and myself back in 2 trips? And Jean, so she can drive back down to pick everyone else up. J.A. Kurt nodded, giving Mystique a confused look as she released him. I can do that. Shit. Shit. Language, Pietro. I raised you better than that. Pietro stiffened, then he slowly turned to face the one who had spoken. Father. So, what do you have for me? Where is that traitor, Mystique? Pietro sagged. Xavier's people have her. I hope you have some good news for me, Pietro. Magneto said in an overly controlled voice, causing Pietro to swallow nervously, looking past his father at the group of mutants following him. I got rid of Superman. And Rogue, they're both gone for good. And I got you some really sweet tech, way better than anything I've ever seen before. He's right. A voice exclaimed and Magneto turned with a raised eyebrow. The man examining the console looked up from the item he was holding. This stuff is beyond cutting edge, it's almost beyond my powers. Pietro edged over to one of the few mutants that he recognized. Pyro, who's that? Francisco Milan, Techmage, one of the new acolytes. Pyro replied quietly. He's a technopath, able to link with machines and understand them. Magneto turned from his conversation with Milan and looked round. Where's Blob? Probably still out cold, he got KO'd at the school. Pietro squeaked and Magneto stiffened. Sabretooth, take Colossus, Frenzy, Pyro, and Mist, Pietro will show you where to go. Retrieve Blob and bring him here. Pietro nodded and let Pyro lead him out of the room. Looking round, he swallowed. I thought Dad only had 5 acolytes. There's a dozen of us now and more in training. Mist said. Amelia Vought, teleportation through transubstantiation. She can turn into mist, hence her name. Pyro explained as Pietro led them to the van that Toad had stolen. Whoa, nice wheels. Not bad. Frenzy said. I'll drive. Pietro glanced at Pyro, who shrugged. Joanna Cargill, she's got super strength and is tough. Real tough. Colossus is tougher, but Frenzy's stronger. Pietro's jaw almost dropped. Why? We were recruited to take down Superman. No human, enhanced or otherwise, deserves to be stronger than a mutant. Frenzy said, holding out her hand. Key. It's in the ignition. Pietro managed. Fine. Frenzy snarled. Come on, and keep your eyes in your head. I'd do what she says. Pyro advised as he guided the shaken youth into the back of the van. She's already killed 3 men for trying to get into her panties. Pietro shuddered. Xavier's mansion. Magneto said, looking at the distant building, a confused expression on his face. Sir. Lance said slowly. Is there something wrong? I cannot detect the mansion. Magneto said slowly. I can detect you, I can detect everything around me, but the mansion and much of the area around it, is blank. Probably that tech that Superman installed. Lance said quietly. It's amazing stuff, it caught Pietro when he tried to break in and it totally negates my shockwaves. Magneto nodded, then turned to Toad. Head to the wall, look around, then return. Toad gulped, then scurried forwards. As he got close to the wall, he seemed to freeze, then he was hurled backwards. I felt nothing. Magneto mused. And yet, I have seen what I needed to, we cannot enter without Charles's permission, at least for now. Let us return to welcome back our wayward comrade. As Magneto strode off, Toad gave Lance a confused look. I think he said that it's time to talk to Fred. Wait, isn't he out cold at the school? Xavier looked at the others, his gaze taking in the air of depression and near despair which hung over them, despair generated by scans showing that the dimensional pocket had imploded. Even the revelation about Kit's parentage and his reaction to finally knowing who his birth mother had been hadn't dislodged the atmosphere, instead it had somehow accentuated it. So, let me get this straight. Ororo said slowly. Nightcrawler's biological father is a mutant named Azazel, who looks like a bigger, red Kurt with the same powers. Mystique nodded. I think he experimented on himself first. I don't know if he was originally a teleporter or a physical enhancer, or even human, come to that. Kurt was normal until Azazel experimented on him. I still don't know if Kurt's powers were induced or implanted. All I knew at the time was that I had to get away with my son, but Azazel, he sent his wolfkin after me. They trapped me on a bridge and in doing so, knocked Kurt out of my hands. I managed to escape several days later, but found that Kurt had already been found and adopted by the Wagners. I saw that they loved him, so I kept my distance, but whenever I had enough money, I would donate some to them. So you are the Ivan. Kurt gasped. That money saved us several times, mein Mutta und Vater wandered, sie handed to thank you. As I want to thank them. Mystique said softly. As for Rogue, I adopted her when she was 3 after her family died in an accident. I was Irene Adler back then. We were together for almost 10 years and I always wanted to introduce you both to each other. But then Magneto demanded my return. He forced me to leave Rogue despite the fact that a precog had told us what her powers would be. He didn't care, he didn't see how she could be as useful as me. Until my son appeared. Martha said. Mystique nodded. Clark drove Eric almost insane. He thought Clark was another mutant, one with multiple powers. You don't know how rare that is, less than 1% of mutants have 2 powers, having 3 or more is virtually unheard of. Yet there was Superman with his invulnerability, flight, strength, perception, lots of abilities in one individual. Eric wanted to recruit him, then when he realized that Clark had become one of you, he wanted to turn him. Then he found out Clark wasn't a mutant, and he went nuts. Thought he was an enhanced human. So did I, actually. Yeah. Kitty sighed. When I discovered he was a real-life alien. I mean, it was like wow. Mystique nodded, her eyes still shadowed. It explains so much, how he got all his powers, how he always knew who I was, even the tech you use. And now, he's gone. Silence descended again, then Mystique turned to face Xavier. I never knew Clark except as an enemy, an opponent who I feared and who I respected. But even I saw how great his heart was, how he took in my 2 children into his own family without hesitation. I know I stood against you before, but if you will have me, I would like to join you. I cannot replace Clark, but maybe I can help shoulder part of the burden that he can no longer carry. You're... Fred? Wake up, Fred. Fred Dukes slowly opened his eyes, flinching at the lancing light that seemed to stab through his eyes into his skull. What happened? We got our butts kicked, but at least we took down Superman and Rogue. Pietro said from his seat beside the mattress that Fred was lying on. We're being pulled out of Bayville, Pop's got his new base running and we're moving to help out. Fred blinked several times, trying to fit the fragmented information into a pattern that he could recognize. The tech we grabbed has caused Dad to totally rethink his plans. Pietro added. He and Techmage were going totally geek over it. Apparently Pops was planning on using some mystic gem to boost the powers of the mutants who wanted to help him, but this new tech and some odd green rocks he's been collecting, he says that the world will change. Fred gave up and slumped back on his mattress. We're going to Asteroid M. Pietro continued, not noticing Fred falling asleep. I'd only heard about it, now we'll get to see it. Chapter 19, New Horizons. Whoa. Toad's exclamation was more of a long sigh as he looked out of the viewport of the plane they were on, his gaze fixed on the kilometer-long asteroid that had been snatched by an unknown force from space and was now hovering, apparently without support, above the Antarctic ice. Yeah, Pietro agreed. Apparently it used to use a nuclear reactor to generate lift, but then Dad discovered these weird green rocks in Texas that were giving off some really weird energy, and decided to use them instead. Toad nodded, his face still pressed against the viewport. Do we get a tower like that one? Oh, I hope I get a penthouse suite. Are there any babes? Shut it. Lance growled. We'll be lucky to have a room each. I overheard the acolytes talking about us. They aren't impressed. Aren't impressed. Toad pouted, leaping away from the viewport and striking a pose. I'm Toad. I can leap tall buildings, climb any surface. And get squashed if you keep spouting that shit. Frenzy snarled, entering the compartment. Faced with an angry woman with super strength, Toad did what Pietro privately considered to have probably been the most intelligent thing he had ever done since they had first met. He fainted. Frenzy looked down at him, her lips curved in distaste, then she brushed her dreadlocks back and turned her glance to the other three, all of whom were trying to look as innocent and inconspicuous as possible. In Pietro and Lance's case, by hiding behind Fred. Frenzy shook her head. Once we land, you'll be taken to your quarters. Stay there. Your skills will be evaluated, and if lacking, which I have no doubt they are, you will be assigned remedial training. If you want to quit, you'll be placed in the brig until Magneto's plan is completed. Now strap yourselves in, and that thing as well, we'll be landing in a few minutes. Giving them a glare, Frenzy returned to the cockpit. Pietro moved to drag Toad to a seat and Lance moved out from behind Fred. Fred, I'm starting to have some serious second thoughts about all this. He whispered. Fred nodded in agreement. Viho. You said it, Kurt. Evan agreed as they looked out at the large area. To one side of them, a perfectly transparent wall held back the ocean, while the roof above was covered in lighting and other, less identifiable items of technology. The floor, however, was a field of grass with occasional areas of bare earth, while fruit trees stood dotted around. In the middle of the giant room was a stone spire, doors, windows, and balconies carved into the visible portion of it as it rose to pierce the ceiling. Sanctuary. Xavier said quietly. Clark approached me with this idea several months ago. Using the raw materials of the seabed and the capabilities of the fortress, he created this place. An underwater habitat the same size as the fortress, where mutants who are too different to survive in the greater world can come to live in peace. This is the topmost level, taking up a third of the volume. The other levels are not as high, but serve their own purposes. Living areas, social areas, medical wings, places reserved for retail, hydroponics, and other systems. Over 1,000 mutants can live here, and more habitats like this can be wanted. This place to be a gift, an offering of shelter and hope, but I see it as part of his legacy. His legacy? Mystique said, and Charles nodded sadly. Clark was a true hero, helping others with no thought of reward for himself. He wanted this place to be a refuge, a place where all were welcome, regardless of looks or powers. I saw no reason to go against his wishes, and every reason to agree with him. I only knew him a little while. Evan said slowly, but he inspired me. Heck, I ain't cut classes once since coming here and my grades are going up. Ororo glanced at him curiously, then looked away, having obviously decided that the answers gained from asking would probably not be to her liking. Professor, what's with the rock? Kitty asked. I'm glad you asked. Xavier said. That rock spire was incorporated into the sanctuary and turned into the central tower. It extends above sea level, so we used it to attach a small pier and a helipad for access to here without going through the fortress. It also acts as an air intake, although the systems built into the sanctuary can provide more than enough air under normal circumstances. Welcome to Asteroid M, said the tall green-eyed man as the former Brotherhood looked round. I am Alan Urisic, but while you are here, you will call me Chrome. I can transmute the elements at will, including my own. You may not see the combat capability of my skills, but rest assured that I am one of the more deadly people here. Pietro nodded and Chome motioned for them to follow him. Your testing will begin tomorrow, assuming that you still wish yourselves worthy of being considered for inclusion into the Acolytes. I heard that you managed to defeat Superman, so I look forwards to seeing you in action. Here are your quarters, food will be provided. Question. Lance said. Your white hair streak, are you related to Rogue? The girl who proved useless against Superman. Chrome replied. No. But with Superman gone, the greatest threat to Magneto's master plan is no more. Pietro drew himself up and smirked at the reference to his greatest triumph while the other three looked at each other. What is this plan, and how can we help? Fred rumbled and Chrome gave an approving smile to them. Two excellent questions, but I am afraid I cannot give you the answers at this time. The plan is known only to the acolytes and those who are needed for it, but it will lead to Homo superior claiming its rightful place as the dominant species on this planet. As for what you can do, you can prove yourselves worthy to stand alongside the acolytes. No problems. Pietro smirked, then he seemed to shrink into himself as Chrome glared at him. There is more to being an acolyte than simple power, young speedster. You must learn to use that power, to follow orders, to place the mission above your very existence if needed. You must place yourself fully under the command of Magneto, obey all his orders without question. That is the very basis of the acolytes. You have followed his instructions, but your arrogance will hold you back. Lance managed not to smirk. Come. Your new quarters await you, and then you shall receive the tour. Penthouse. Toad asked hopefully. The door of the large cottage perched atop the low cliff opened and Logan stepped through, looking round and then nodding. Stepping clear, he turned and looked with approval at the cottage, noting the small windows and the large garage door as well as the nearly microscopic crystalline nodes of Kryptonian tech. That's one heck of an access point. He noted as Xavier emerged, followed by the others. Xavier nodded with a smile. Clark built this so that we could get people into and out of Sanctuary without having them pass through the fortress or the mansion. Xavier explained. There's also a tunnel leading to the mansion itself which I will show you, but I thought that knowing that this place existed would be a good idea for you. Yep. Logan said. Escape hatch, or a way to get reinforcements in if the Institute is ever surrounded. Excellent planning, Chuck. Xavier gave him a long look, before sighing. That was not what I had planned, Logan, and you know it. This is for the day that mutants are revealed to the world. The Institute will attract attention, so having an entrance that can be kept secret. Yeah, Chuck. Got it. Logan drawled, looking round, then his gaze sharpened as he saw the metal plaque set into the wall by the front door. Kent Cottage. In memory of Anna Kent and Clark Kent. Xavier explained softly as the others joined them, their gazes transfixed by the simple yet meaningful message. Thank you. A voice said and everyone spun round, staring in shock at the trio approaching them. And this is the power core. Chrome said, leading them into a large cavern illuminated by an odd green glow. These rocks that form the power core are, like asteroid M itself, originally from space. Research has shown that they landed several decades ago, primarily in Texas, and that they can induce odd effects in humans. However, they cannot affect anyone who has an X gene. The amount of power they exude is impressive. TechMage is still attempting to figure out how they do it. His current theory is that they somehow tap into other dimensions, channeling power from them. What you see before you is almost 3/4 of the rock, more is being used for the plan due to its unique properties. With the aid of these rocks, and the technology you managed to acquire for the cause, our supremacy is assured. Cool. Toad exhaled, looking down at the conglomeration of pipes and glowing rocks. This is so awesome. I am glad you think so. A voice said and Chrome bowed to the new arrival. Lord Magneto, welcome back. I trust your trip was productive. It was. Magento smiled, removing his helmet and holding it in his left arm. I have obtained a sample of the new room temperature superconductor. Chrome, I will need you to analyze and duplicate it. We will need quite a lot of it for the plan to work. Pietro, the new technology you managed to acquire has proven very interesting indeed. The console alone has more than enough processing power to run the entire asteroid 10 times over. I am proud of you, you have proven yourself to be a true mutant. Pietro straightened at the compliment. With Superman no more and with the new technology to integrate into my plans, I believe that the end result will come within the next 2 months, and probably far sooner than that. No one and nothing will be able to stop us now. Clark. Martha's shocked whisper was the only noise in the clearing and the tallest figure nodded with a smile. Sorry to worry you, Mom, but I had some business to take care of first. Martha dashed the tears out of her eyes, then she found herself wrapped in her son's arms. A moment later, Rogue joined in, being careful not to let her skin and Martha's come into contact. How? Martha sobbed in joy. How did you return? You can thank Jonathan Silvercloud here, Clark said as the American Indian teen gave an embarrassed wave. He's the one who created the place he called Middleverse, and using the technology in the probe we sent, as well as a few other items that had got sucked into the dimensional pocket, he was able to create a portal gun that used the energy of the dimensional pocket to open a portal from the inside. I flew us through it before it could collapse, then he dissolved the Middleverse so that it wouldn't cause any more problems. Then what took you so long to return? Amanda asked, and Clark smiled in embarrassment, rubbing the back of his head. First, we had to track down Forge's family. They'd moved a decade ago. Not far, fortunately, but we had to do a bit of searching in the records office. Led to a bit of a family reunion. Forge met his 3 siblings, all of whom are bigger than him now. I have an older, or is it younger, brother and 2 sisters. Forge grinned. I'm still trying to work out if I'm the big brother, or the little one. Anyway, Clark continued, when I offered Forge a chance to study at Xavier's, hope you don't mind, Professor, Forge's family were amazed that their newly returned son was being given a chance to study with Superman, Cyclops, and Wolverine. Forge himself is very interested in the technology used. I was hoping we could hire him. He's gifted with machines. Several people raised their eyebrows at the stress on the word gifted, and Charles smiled. A mutant with the gift of technology. Impressive. Thanks. Forge grinned. Clark showed me some groovy stuff and I look forwards to learning more. Groovy? Kitty asked. Did you really say groovy? Brother. Colossus stepped into the room, reverting from his metallic form as he did so. Smiling broadly, he walked over to the bed and knelt down by it, reaching out to hold the hand of the young girl sat there with a book in her hand. How are you feeling, Ilyana? Still weak, Piotr. Ilyana answered with a smile, but Chrome came to play and he gave me some chocolate. Mist gave me a new book to read and helped me with my maths. And how are your English lessons going? Ilyana frowned in concentration. They are good, I am. What is the word for learning? You are learning. Piotr smiled. That is good. English is one of the best languages to use outside Russia. Even if most of it makes no sense. Ilyana giggled and patted the side of her bed. Accepting the invitation, Piotr sat on it and Ilyana snuggled up to him. Where did you go today? America, to collect some things that Magneto needed and to set in motion something that will keep his enemy distracted. Ilyana craned her head and looked up at her brother. I don't like him, brother. He seems cold. His heart is ice. But he has his people searching for a cure for you. Colossus replied. Without his help, you would be far worse than you are now. I know. Ilyana pouted, earning a small chuckle from Piotr. I hope I get cured soon, brother. I hope so too, little sister. Colossus said, gently squeezing her in his arms. I hope so too. Chapter 20, Unstoppable. Cyclops looked at the visor in his hands, then he turned his gaze to Forge, who grinned at him. You hold in your hands the Mark V K-Tech visor. All the goodies of the Mark IV, and a few more besides. So what does it do? Evan asked curiously, and Forge placed his right hand on a control panel. His hand transformed into a metallic multi-tool which interfaced with the panel, and a large hologram of the new visor appeared behind Forge, splitting apart to show the internal systems. The Mark V incorporates the same controls, or equivalents of the Mark IV. Mental control sensors, optical tracking, a projected HUD with multi-spectrum scanner feed, you know, all that jazz. However, it doesn't use the ruby lens that characterized the Mark IV series. Cyclops dropped his gaze back to the visor. But then how? It uses Kryptonian force shield technology modified to be powered by the very beam it stops. Forge grinned. In fact, everything you carry on you can be recharged by the spillover power. But there's more. The field can tune your optical blasts, turning the concussive energy into thermal and vice versa, although the total energy of the beam will drop as a result. This means you can fire your beams without having to worry about flash frying anyone in the area, or you can heat up your coffee without blasting it across the room. And with the HUD interface, it'll let you auto-track, directing the beam to hit your target with pinpoint precision. Basically, if you can see it, you can hit it. Evan managed to choke down a laugh at that. Now, Forge continued, that would only be version 4.7 had Clark and I not incorporated the supercharge capability. By using a surface induction and projected field array, you can store up extra blasts which appears to others as a red glow around the visor. At full charge, it'll give you 30 seconds at triple power compared to your normal blasts, but it takes a while to charge up and can maintain the charge for a maximum of 5 minutes before the field begins to degrade and the charge dissipates. You need to charge it up for a full 90 seconds to get the maximum effect, but you can release the stored energy at any time and at any level. Scott stared at Forge, his mouth dropped open in shock and Forge shrugged. Hey, I was fooling around with the chirpy tech here and Clark suggested I helped with a little project of his. That's the result. Scott stared down at the visor in his hands with a newfound appreciation. Suddenly a cloud of smoke marked Kit's arrival. It's ZE-TV. ZE Avengers are in T-Vabble. Cyclops jolted in shock. What? Thor slammed into the ground, hard enough to leave a significant dent as Captain America leapt backwards, avoiding the scything fist by millimeters. Who the hell do you think you're facing? The red-clad giant roared. I'm the Juggernaut, bitches. Get out of my way. Iron Man swooped low, firing his repulsor blasts, then corkscrewed through the air in a frantic evasion maneuver as the Juggernaut threw a car at him. Of all the times for Banner to be down with the flu. He grumbled as he scanned the car, determined it was empty and let it finish dropping. We need some serious reinforcements for this guy. Thou dost speak the truth, mine armored ally. Thor moaned, sitting up and rubbing at his jaw before he grabbed his hammer. It be just the three of us remaining against this behemoth now. Even as he spoke, Iron Man made the mistake of getting too close and the Juggernaut grabbed his ankle and slammed him into the ground, causing bits of metal to pinwheel away. Last two. Juggernaut smirked. And then I'm gonna stomp my little brother for putting me away last time. Little brother? Steve queried as he somersaulted backwards, having learned from harsh experience that not even his vibranium shield could successfully stop the Juggernaut's punches. I do not know. Thor grunted as his hammer swing was effortlessly deflected. By my father's name, I do not think we shall win this battle, my friend. Magneto smirked as he watched the battle raging on the large screen. Leaning back in his throne-like chair, he watched as the half-brother of his former friend smacked the so-called Thunder God into a boulder, causing him to slump down, leaving a crater where he had impacted. That's gotta hurt. Sabretooth noted. Indeed. Magneto answered. I believe that you once had the unfortunate pleasure of going up against Cain Marco yourself. Man's a psychopath. Sabretooth growled. And from Creed, that's saying something. Frenzy smirked, a smirk which became a challenging grin when Sabretooth growled at her. On the screen, Juggernaut threw a car which arced up towards the helicopter doing the filming before a blast of red light deflected it. Magneto raised an eyebrow. Cyclops. Steve said in relief as a familiar midnight blue and yellow-clad figure stepped up beside him, one hand raised to the side of the visor from which the blast had originated. Is Superman here? Flyboy's unavailable at the moment, Steve. Logan growled as he stepped forwards, claws extended. A cloud of smoke marked the appearance of a blue-furred humanoid that Steve had never seen before as well as a young, red-headed woman. Captain, I know how to defeat him, so. Cyclops began and Steve nodded. I'll take my cue from you. You're in charge. Thanks. Cyclops said, pausing to unleash a blast that rocked Juggernaut back on his heels. The only way to take Juggernaut down is telepathic blasts. Jean is holding a mental link to the professor, she'll be guiding his attack, but we need to get that helmet off him. Logan, you distract him. Kurt, teleport to undo those latches, I'll keep hitting him to keep him further off balance. Cap, go with Logan, fight to distract, get one of the latches if you can. Jean, stay back and get ready. With a bestial roar, Logan sprinted forwards, his claws carving short furrows in the ground. By his side, moving in perfect harmony as if they had done it 1,000 times, Captain America charged into battle once again, his shield poised to attack or defend. No Superman. Frenzy noted. I guess that proves that your kid did indeed get rid of the caped Boy Scout. It's disgusting how short stuff works with that enhanced human. Sabretooth bit out. Go Juggernaut, show them what a mutant can do. Juggernaut is an enhanced mutant, Magneto said, causing the others to look at him. He used an ancient relic, one I now possess, to activate his latent X gene, turning him into what you see before you. It is somewhat unfortunate that his entire philosophy revolves around destroying his brother and causing as much damage as possible. His powers would have been a welcome addition to our ranks. On the screen, Juggernaut roared silently in frustration as Wolverine and Captain America almost danced around his clumsy swings while Nightcrawler seemed to appear and vanish again with no discernible pattern. A classic case of brute force being effortlessly defeated by technique. Techmage noted, glancing up from the device he was working on. What is that teleporter doing, anyway? He's not trying to attack, and the pattern's all wrong for distraction. He's got a task to do, but what? Magneto stiffened. He's opening Juggernaut to a telepathic attack. What? How? All three attackers retreated as Scott fired a pinpoint concussive blast that struck at the base of Juggernaut's helmet. Without the latches to secure it, thanks primarily to Nightcrawler's well-timed feints and dashes, the dome-like helmet flew into the air, leaving Juggernaut's head exposed. With a roar of rage mixed with fear, Juggernaut started to sprint forwards, only to be knocked backwards by a beam of red force fired by Cyclops, a beam enhanced with the supercharge function of the visor. Now, Jean. Professor. I am here, Jean. Guide me Jean opened her mind to the link, feeling Professor X, interfaced with Cerebro, follow her thoughts to where Juggernaut was barely standing up under the pressure of the almost solid beam of light. Raising one hand to her forehead as a way to help her focus, Jean stretched out her other hand and concentrated as she felt the first psychic blast arriving. Melding a small part of her power with it and suppressing the amazement she felt at the sheer depth of power it originated from, Jean guided it to its target, then reached for the next mental bolt. Kane Marco grabbed at his head, his face contorting in pain as the first bolt hit, then the second, then the third. Slumping to his knees, he tried to fight the incoming blasts, but each one seemed to strike deeper and deeper into his mind, until all that existed was despair, pain, and finally, merciful, welcoming blackness. A long, dark silence engulfed the room, then Magneto rose from his throne and stalked off, cape flaring as he left. The others watched him go, then looked at each other. What just happened? Pyro asked nervously. Sabretooth growled before answering. Those kids just took down a mutant as strong as Superman was, and made it look easy. If they get a boost from the device, we're gonna be in real trouble, assuming we aren't already. Did anyone notice something odd about Cyclops? Techmage asked, frowning. Searching for the controls, he paused, then rewound the broadcast, pausing it to show the red aura that had formed prior to the blast that had knocked back Juggernaut. Letting everyone see what had caught his attention, he then slowly played it, showing how the aura fed the beam. What the hell? Frenzy asked rhetorically. He can store his blasts externally? When the hell did he learn to do that? Is it him or the visor? Colossus asked slowly. Superman had strange tech, maybe Cyclops is using it. Can't be. Techmage said. I've studied the tech, it can be used to amplify and manipulate energy, sure, but doing something like that? Nuh-uh. No way. Then what the heck will they be like when the device boosts their power? Frenzy asked, her voice betraying her concern. Everyone in the room froze at her question, carefully avoiding each other's gazes. It was an honor serving under you. Captain America said, shaking Cyclops' hand firmly as the other Avengers, finally recovering from the beatdown they had received, gathered round Juggernaut and began the process of restraining him ready for his return into captivity. In the background, the Blackbird descended, landing gear extending as it came to pick up the quartet of mutants. You have an excellent team here. What are they called? We call ourselves the X-Men. Scott replied as Logan approached. The two old friends fist bumped. Logan, you've got a great squad here. Steve grinned. Expect Fury to start offering places on the Avengers to any of your team who are interested. Over my dead body. Logan scowled, causing Steve's grin to widen. Well, consider the offer on the table, just in case. You headed back to your secret base. Logan nodded. You wanna see the inside of the Blackbird again? Just so you know what those of us who don't have to rely on the cheapest contractor can get upgraded. Heck, maybe you'll decide to ditch your current gig and join us. Steve laughed at that. You always hated government work, didn't you, Logan? Sure, but remember, I will have to report to Fury. Logan nodded as he led Steve up the ramp and into the main area of the plane. Steve frowned at the seats that lined the compartment. No seat belts. Each seat contains its own tractor field and inertial dampening system. Logan smiled. With a capacitor that lets it work for 30 minutes without external power. It was something Flyboy was working on. Where was he, anyway? Steve asked. From what I remember, he could have taken down Juggernaut without a problem. I could, but then everyone would know I was still alive, so I kept back, holding myself in reserve unless I was truly needed. A familiar voice said as the cockpit door opened. Magneto thinks I'm dead, and until we know what he is planning, I'd like to keep it that way. As such, I'll still be heroing, but once again, I'll be doing it as close to zero profile as I can. Dead? Steve repeated, his voice shocked. How? He thought I was trapped in a collapsing dimensional pocket. Clark replied, his smile lighting up his eyes. I'll admit it was close, but we made it out and got a new recruit out of it. The redhead. Steve stated, and Logan managed to disguise his laughter as a cough. Steve looked at him suspiciously. Nope, she's one of the first. Logan growled after he managed to stop sniggering. You really think we'd risk kids without training? No way, you Avengers might go out all gung-ho, but we train ours up properly. I remember Bucky, Steve. One of the things I do remember. Steve flinched at the name, then nodded slowly. Maybe I can visit one day? See your training and so on. Sure, just don't tell Fury anything about what you see unless you do us a big favor first. Logan stated. I'm serious, Steve. We got goodies that'd make Fury willing to sell his remaining eye for, and Magneto's already grabbed some of it. If Fury can take him down, or help us to do so, the stuff Magneto grabbed is his, but we need to know everything Fury has on Magneto and his goons. Everything. You get it, you team up with us and the things Magneto took, they're all yours once we take the bastard down. He's got a plan, Steve, we don't know what it is, but I really think that it'll be bad news. Steve nodded, his eyes hard. The headline story tonight, the new superhero team known as the X-Men. Cyclops, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Miss Marvel, the newest quartet to take up the challenge of upholding the law against powerful enemies. Fury turned his attention away from the bubbling newsreader and looked at the Avengers who were staring at the screen. After a few minutes, he muted the news feed. Gentlemen, we got our asses kicked out there. He said. I know Juggernaut is tough by any standard, but we got defeated in a running battle that lasted all day, and this new team took him down in less than 10 minutes. Captain America was the only one who didn't try to avoid his piercing gaze. We need to find out how they took Juggernaut down and what other threats are out there waiting for us to stumble across. Fury said calmly as he tapped his console, changing the image on the screen. At this time, based on information given to us, the greatest threat is almost certainly this man, Eric Lenshair, known as Magneto, and his followers, the Acolytes. Check the description for the links to the author.